And our last speaker for this morning's session is Ganz, who is a freelance artist and author based in Berlin.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much also to Piper and all the whole team of Youth Project for putting up this lovely and inspiring conference. And I would like to add something to this very diverse pot from my point of view. But when I will talk to you a little bit about unsolicited writings, which means writings that had been done by ordinary people which were without permission. We heard a lot about official writings today and yesterday, and what I would like to give an insight to is all these writings by the people. And the red question or the red line or question through my presentation would like to be did the reception of these unsolicited writings during all these centuries in public spaces, did it change, and did the motivation change during the decades? And unfortunately, I do not have an academic or scientific background. As John said, I'm an artist, so I continue with Tim's self-presentation. So I did my field research during the years, and I published 3 books about what you today call street art or graffiti. The first one was about the worldwide phenomenon of graffiti and street art. Then I was looking into the women who are doing graffiti in this movement in a very male-dominated scene. And the last one, which might be also the reason why I got invited here to come to this conference, was completely about text-based street art. Why do I use this really bumpy word of unsolicited writings? Is because I want to avoid the word of graffiti. When you go back to the origins of this word, it's coming from scratching something into surfaces. But I focus on anything that had been done on surfaces, either with a brush or spray paint, or even inscribed with stones or whatever tools you want to use. The other positive thing while using unsolicited writings is because it does not give a direct discussion about the illegality of modern day graffiti or street art. As we all know, graffiti and street art is meanwhile repressed by law. You can go to prison to that, or you have to have a lot of fines for that. So, which is really different, and this is why what I want to look into my presentation is like, did this perception change during the centuries? I will also use the words graffiti and street art later on because it's really a very long word to use unsolicited writings. And what I can only give you today is like a real very tiny view. I can only know just a little bit to what is really going on with graffiti or street art or this phenomenon. You can make a whole conference about everything what's going on actually. Michael McDonald, who was supposed to speak after me, he would dive a little bit deeper into that and giving some historical examples in Arabia. So that's the introduction. So writing in public spaces seems to be one of our main activities as human beings, like Flint ... who wrote his name and his slogans on the train in New York City back in the days when graffiti started. But leaving a mark or leaving a trace of one's own or our own existence seems to be very common as human beings. It's giving it's like to say, I was here, I visited this place, and very often, this is what I'm going to show you later, it's like these traces of our existence that we leave a mark on are still existing thousands of years when the people are gone. This is what UKRI said yesterday. It's like when you read the names out, the people are still alive. You can still see that they're here. So the memory is kept alive from them. This phenomenon of graffiti or unsolicited writings have been very much neglected by science or historians. They often say it's like coming from children who are just being bored and doing some damage on the surfaces. During the past years, there have been a lot of research in this topic because these unsolicited writings give very authentic glimpse or view into the people's lives. Because they were writing on walls what they saw, what they experienced, what they were thinking. And they reacted to everything what they experienced. And for us researchers and artists, we see us in a line of a very long line of public art in a way, which is dating back to the prehistoric cave art. And what fascinated me the most when I saw these paintings from the Chauvet cave, they recreated the cave by professional artists, and what really fascinated me the most was not only the use of tools or the materials they used the whole cave for a scenery. And when you accompany that with, when you imagine, they also use the acoustics in these caves. When you imagine that these people were going into the caves with their torches and the images were reflecting from the stones, and you have music and you have words, and there's some kind of created a multimedia experience. This is what you maybe call today immersive. There are several categories of unsolicited writings, and I want to just concentrate on a few of them. One, as I said before, is writing your name. And this is very different to what the people or what the artists are doing today, because before they used their real names. Today they're using alter egos, which has positive and negative things, which I want to talk about a little bit later. But doing this kind of writing, which I found in the monastery of Bebenhausen in southern Germany, it requires a certain amount of skill to put your name into the sandstone. I mean, sandstone is pretty soft material, but when you look at, I mean, it's not really parallel to the edges of the stone, but when you see it from 1604, it's really accurate. You have the series and everything's really pretty proper done. Compared to that example, which you can find in the Elizabeth Church in Marburg. That's a very long writing, but it's not really as accurate as the image before. And this piece was done by a guy named Engelhard Brechnitz, and he actually wrote the year when he wrote it was 1593, and he wrote his age. He was 6 years old when he did that. And Engelhard was actually a real person. He appears in the personal register of 1594 in Marburg. So you can trace him on. And he supposed was a singer in the church when he was 6 years old. And he was not the only person. I don't want to talk about the writings who have been in this Elizabeth's chamber, this holy one, where only a few people could get access to. But a lot of students from the nearby Marburg University left their names in the church. And when you think about that, the church was not accessible for the public in general. So when the students went there, it was like a rare visit, because it was mostly open to the people who were living nearby this church. And I always asked myself when I saw these writings, how did the authorities or the people react? I mean, today, so when you see somebody, you call the police, but how did they react back in the days? I mean, when you see the church, it's not really big, it's 60 to 40 meters, and the writing that Engelhard did was in the Northern Isles. So when did he do that? He must have been attending some kind of church service. So when you scratch your name into the surface, into the stone with a knife, somebody could hear that. So this constant stressing. How did they react? Was it kind of accepted in a way? And this leads maybe to the question that, or maybe scientists had the question that, okay, children are doing that, teenagers are doing that. But actually it's like people from all classes, from all ages were writing their names on surfaces. Were they like travelers or adventurers who just left their name? I've been here at this Luxor, like this one in Luxor temple, so I was here. And to give a proof that also people from higher classes is like Lord Byron. He left his name on a couple of ancient sites. This one is in Greece, and maybe you have noticed he's using a very different writing as well. It's very neat handwriting. We don't know if he did it by himself or if somebody else had to do that for him, but actually it was some kind of fashion some kind of centuries ago. I only found one example, which was a travel book from 1840, where they actually started to complain about all these name writings on the pyramids of Giza. You might correct me if somebody else wrote something about that as well, but But this seems to be common to other cultures. I go to Rome, to the Roman Empire later on, but you might correct me, Jordan, for the Maya people, but this seems to be very common in the Maya culture as well. The only difference to the other historical writings is that the Mayas did not write in public spaces, because in public spaces you can all find its glyphs and the stories of the emperors. They wrote inside in the private rooms, which is, when you compare that to the Mayan ancestors who are still living today, they still inscribe something inside their private rooms. And this is carried out by the whole family. So the youngsters are doing that, the adults are doing that. So you have some kind of hodgepodge of writings and inscriptions in the back rooms of their houses. And that writing on public spaces was pretty common, was pretty obvious when they were looking into Pompeii. They found almost 11,000 examples of inscriptions there. And this is not the whole thing. Many of them had disappeared and they did not discover whole Pompeii at all. But when you look at that, it's like writing seems to have to be some kind of daily communication for the Romans. It was fully integrated in the social system. And comparing that to today, it's like they have, it seems that they predated a little bit our modern day of social media. You can find a lot of inscriptions which are very similar to what people write on Facebook today. Like this example, for example, the man I have having dinner with is a barbarian. They even tagged other people, like this one, Sarah, you're being not very nice, leaving me all alone like this. Other inscriptions were similar to what is a Google review, meanwhile. There is an inscription on the outside wall of a restaurant where somebody wrote, the finance officer of the Emperor Nero says the food here is poison. Or even TripAdvisor you can find like that. It's like, traveler, you ate at Pompeii, but you go to UKRI to drink. In UKRI, the drink is much better. So one scientist said that the big difference between modern social media and historical ancient writings on public spaces is that they have been less bitter than today. They are giving a more positive meaning. I mean, I showed you 2 examples as well. There have been also very critical and very cynical inscriptions in Pompeii they found, but in general, they had a more positive meaning. And this leads to the conclusion that the Roman people had a very different concept of privacy. I mean, when you compare that 10 people are sitting in the toilet together doing their business without any separation, they're talking to each other, that must be a complete different version of privacy. And their houses were somehow, were like a business card. So when you enter the public areas of the house, for sure you need to write on the guest book. So leave a mark on the walls of the house. And the owners of the house did not delete that. They didn't paint over that. You can still see that in Pompeii. Which is far different to what is going on with modern day street art or graffitis. Modern street art or graffitis started around 1966 or 1967, and they started to begin to write their real names or the nicknames on the walls. This changed later on, this changed later when they started to use alter egos, and they often, especially in New York, they added kind of numbers to their names, which was a reference to which street they were coming from. Like, for example, Stay he was living in 149th Street. And the positive thing about creating an alter ego has many aspects. One thing is you create your own identity with that. You have some kind of logo or brand, you are recognizable when you see a piece of somebody else, you see the signature or the tag, it's like, okay, this is this guy and this is that guy. The other thing is, compared to historic inscriptions, you are protected by your name anyway. You cannot find yourself in a name register anymore. It's like people still don't know who's Banksy. They all ask who that guy is. And the other positive thing about using an alter ego is it abolishes completely all forms of race, gender, religion. You don't know who wrote that, whether the woman was he educated or a student or whatever. which is sometimes funny for the women because, and for the men, they are playing with these kind of things. I know one example where a guy was using very pinkish and a lady thought, oh, I need to meet this woman. Actually, it was a man. So this is really funny about that. And during the decades, writing evolved a lot because it's like when you have a wall with all these little inscriptions, with all these names, it's really hard to recognize one after another. So the pieces were getting more styles, they were getting far more bigger. And this is what this type of graffiti is all about. And this is why they call it writing. It's all about the name. And this is very typical. It's about the distortion and deconstruction of the regular forms. It's like making it in a very artistic way. And when you ask yourself what is written there, this is by the guy Revok from Los Angeles. So you see how all these things, all the name writing evolved during the years. But at the very same time, when graffiti started in 66 or 67, people did not only write their names on the walls, like this man, John Feckner. He was using the stencil technique where you cut out your word on the template and put it with a spray pen or a brush on the wall. And he very much, when I interviewed him some years ago, he is very much corresponding to the surface or to the place itself. This piece, for example, he created when he was sitting down on the bench and he was seeing all these concrete highways and motorways, and he was thinking, okay, these paths must have been used by the First Nations or Native Americans as well. So that was the reason why he created this piece. Another couple from from the beginning times of graffiti were Jean-Michel Basquiat and Alias. They wrote, or they started doing graffiti under the moniker of Samo. And Samo means same old shit. And they used this copyright sign to somehow create a brand with that. And we all, many of you might have known that Jean-Michel Basquiat got really famous after he was discovered by Andy Warhol, and he passed away sadly very early. But this was the beginning how these guys started. He and Elias were sitting together in their home, and they were thinking what bothered them, and they created these small slogans. And very often these slogans were a critic against the New York City suburbs who were turning into some kind of bohemian or elite art centers. And at that time, we should keep in mind that it was really difficult for African American people to enter into galleries, into the white, which were owned by the white people. So what they did is they took their art into the streets so that it can be seen by the people, which is very similar to one modern form of text-based graffiti, the street poetry. For many artists, poetry is a very essential form of expression. And it's really difficult to publish a poetry book. And they are leading some kind of alienation existence in the bookstores, and not many people buy that. So what the artist did was taking the poetry to the street again, and so that the people can read that and that they can feel with that. This movement is quite young. It started at the beginning of the 2000s, and one of the main hotspots was in Italy, like this guy, Ivan from Milano. Another guy in Mexico started that in '96. So this street poetry evolved very much in Southern Europe and Southern America a lot, but it was taken later on by other artists as well. And as I said before, I just can give you in this half an hour just a tiny glimpse into what's really going on and what kind of forms of art you have in public spaces, like, for example, political slogans. I do not cover it all, like this one. I took a photo in Nepal. It's like, when you see closely enough to these writings, I think there are 4 or 5 layers of writings on this single wall. This is like, for example, in Berlin, we have these 2 football clubs. They also compete with graffiti in the city. You can see layers of either blue, white, or black, or red, white. So they're covering each other, who would have the majority of the power of the streets. One big difference between historic graffiti activists and artists today is we can talk to them. We can just guess why did they do that in the past time, but today we can talk to them and ask about their motivation. And there have been a couple of studies about psychological and sociological and criminological reasons why people do that. And in one couple of studies, they said it's very effective. It's a very powerful emotional and physical sensation to put up your art in public spaces. First reason is that, I mean, you share your stuff with so many people in the public space. You also have an adrenaline rush because you have to take care not to get caught by the police. And the other thing is, and that's what you said about yesterday, the physical impact of putting your art on the wall is very hard. I mean, a spray can is working similar to an airbrush. It's like when you are taking a spray can and a nozzle and make a really fast line on nearby surface, it's like very thick and accurate. And then when you move backwards, it's like fading away and it's a little bit blurry. So it's a little bit similar to that. I mean, you imagine you have a 2-meter high letter of D. It takes your whole body to carry out the outline. And I just rush a little bit through why the people are drawn into that. One reason what the people say is they like the aesthetic appeal. They want to add their own thing into this culture. Another thing is the social aspects. You can make friends with that. Like I said before today, it's like you can go to a complete different country in this world and you meet people, you can stay in their houses, you can go to paint, you share your ideas together, you share techniques together. You can do a lot of group activities. And the other thing is you can get recognition, which is very much different to sometimes when the kids coming from their families where they don't get that. So actually when you work in public spaces, you get fame in a certain way. You get recognition by your peers. Graffiti artists are not very different to actors. They get fame by their peers or through the Oscars. A few people even have a very rebellious or I want to be a naughty kid attitude for that. So I want to make destruction and I want to make my point against the society. That's for sure true. And there are also other artists who just simply write for themselves. It's like a form of their own self-expression. It's just the other canvas. They just extend the studio to the streets, which is similar to other artists who just use the public space. They don't work on canvas. They just use the public space as their material to express themselves. Another interesting aspect is how do white walls or urban surfaces, what appeal do they have to the artists? For graffiti artists, most unicolored walls appear completely boring. They are like lifeless, flat surfaces, and they need to add some kind of creativity to this place. It's also, again, a very effective way of adding or engaging with the urban surfaces or engaging with the urban environment. And like this guy, for example, from the bubble project what he did was putting up these empty bubbles on advertisings everywhere and let the people who were passing by to add something into these bubbles, which was really funny and interesting in a way. Other artists, and I did not cover it, like I said, I can go on for this about this for a couple of hours. Other artists, for example, like LC from Tunisia, what is really interesting about Arabic artists is some of them did not cover the American model of graffiti. They went on with the traditional Arabian calligraphy and they broke the borders and broke the rules of Arabian calligraphy and created something completely new. And a lot of artists also play with their environment, with the architecture, with the colors and with the shape of the houses. Like you can see in this example, the artwork is fitting perfectly into the surrounding. And very often people, it's what I sometimes did, I'm working a lot with the history of a place or with the people who once lived there, so I can include this kind of things in my own art. Other people, for example, like this Brighter Day, Jason Large, they just want, by Brighter Day projects, they just want to make people happy or make people smile when they're on the way to their work, because it's like, oh, I have to work again. And then when they see these kind of things, they're smiling and they are happy again. So what he did is like taking these typical American house for sale or whatever signs and including his very positive messages to them. So as a conclusion, and I can make like Tim my self-promotion again, so you can go to my website and either look into my books to know about more about this phenomenon or to know about my art maybe as well. But as a conclusion, the motivation to write your name into public spaces might not much have changed during the centuries. I mean, people are writing their names as well, what they did since mankind in a way. But today, a lot of people are including art or to bring art in public spaces. And about the reception, as I said, I don't know this, I did not find much proof how the reception was back in the days, historically, or if they got a fine, if they had, when I was young and I was writing on the school desk, I had to clean it actually. They forced me to clean the school desk, but when you inscribe something in the walls, it's like really difficult to move away the whole stone or to flatten the surface again. So there is not much evidence historically how the reception was or how the authorities reacted. As we have seen in OP, then it might be possible that there had been a certain amount of acceptance for these unsolicited writings. But today, graffiti, as I said before, is illegal by law. And the reception or the view on graffiti is very controversial. I mean, everybody can ask, because you can all ask yourself if you like these kinds of things or if you dislike that. I mean, it's most people like what I experience when I talk to people, they always like these kind of figurative things, they can relate to it, but the tag is something different. But when I go back to this physical act of writing a tag, it's like when you see the energy that is put, or you can actually see the energy, how this tag is put on the surface. So when you see a tag, maybe next time, it's like, just think about that. The energy is really energetic when you see the way, especially with a spray paint, how the name is put on the wall. And last but not least is when we compare historic and modern day unsolicited writings, is like when we read graffiti everywhere, we can learn a lot about societies, what is actually going on in our surrounding. Thank you so much.